Welcome, everybody, to another Sober Life podcast. I'm your host, Scott Jones. You're coming to you right here from Sober Life Studios, and this show is brought to you by One Brother, One Sister. One Brother, One Sister, who supplies trainings and education to police officers, firefighters, medical workers, and veterans and military, active military as well. And we bring education in the areas of mental health, trauma, and of course, addiction and alcoholism. We do all this at no cost to our first responders and our veterans. We do it through your donations. So please go to onebrother1sister.com, leave a donation. Anything helps, just so that we can get the message out there. To date, we're proud to say we've trained over 2,500 first responders throughout the country, but there's so many more we have to reach. So help us reach that. And I also want to remind you, if you're watching this show, take a moment, hit the like button, and subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends. I have a great guest. This is somebody that I met not that long ago. I guess we've only known each other for about
like 3 months or so.
3 months, maybe 4 months. Yeah, that's it. And usually, by this time, women run screaming from me. But, we've been able to maintain a friendship, which is cool. This is Megan Potter. She's LMHC, MCAP. She's a clinical director over at JC Recovery Center. And we're going to talk about all of that. But we were talking for like an hour before the show even started.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you and everything. Why do you do this work? What got you into working with mental health and addiction?
So I happen to be the child of an addict. Two. One, went into recovery earlier in my life, thank goodness. And my mother is still in active addiction, who also has a mental illness. I remember being in like fourth grade and writing a poem called like The Clear Glass Bottle and trying to figure out why I wasn't good enough and why that clear glass bottle meant more to my mother than me. And I guess being the child of an addict and kind of living between two different households, I wanted to understand why. Why do people reach for very toxic means to kind of deal with their lives on a daily basis when they know the consequences of it? Why isn't your family, your loved ones, why aren't these things enough to make you better? So I opted to start studying it. Initially, ironically, I was actually a Spanish major. And
oh, really?
I wanted to be a translator. I thought it'd be so cool to be bilingual. And then I took my first psych class and it kind of solidified it for me where I'm like, nope, I'm doing this with both feet. I'm jumping right in. And my first focus was substance abuse. And then mental health came behind it. And I started at the bottom of the field in Broward County, and I've worked my way up to where I am, just kind of learning as I go and figuring out where the needs are. But my passion is because this has affected my family. It's affected me. So, and I wanted to be able to understand like, why?
Right. Yeah. Because we're going back, for you, I mean, you're like what, 29.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
We're going to go with that. Okay. Podcasters lie. I'm just going to tell you, but I mean, this goes back a ways. So back in that time, I mean, around what years was this when you were a child and experiencing all this stuff with your family?
Early 90s.
Early 90s. Not a lot of information available for people about even everyday mental health issues or addictions. I mean, it was just like an addict was the person you saw on the street,
Mm-hmm.
and mental health people were in straitjackets and in rubber rooms, right home with non-toxic Crayola crayons,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, that's what we knew.
Mm-hmm.
But are we getting better? Is there more information now out there? I mean, are we moving in the right direction?
I mean, I feel like we're starting to. There's still a stigma. I grew up traditional Italian New York. So my family, for example, was very much on, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like get over it. Mental health was very much minimum, and not intentionally or disrespectfully. It's just we were very much into what do you do about it? And it was kind of stigmatized, even addiction is still kind of stigmatized. I do think there is more information out there. We are still kind of dealing with people swallowing it and acknowledging it and understanding it. The information's there. It's just how are they receiving it is always going to be the barrier until we get everybody on the same page.
There was a lot of suck it up buttercup. I mean, just,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everybody gets sad. Just get up and go do
Mm-hmm.
something. And that was it, kicking the pants. And it wasn't a common conversation.
Mm-mm.
Forget about stigma itself, even just talking about
Mm-hmm.
the difference between being sad and being depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something I've always wanted to advocate for, was we do so much bullshit in high school and junior high. I think that should be a place where we should have a real health class. not watch the movie about this egg and the sperm and the,
Mhm.
but a real where they can describe the difference between, when somebody's sad, which we all get sad,
Mhm.
and when depression becomes an issue, and teach that to children. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I feel like that's, being in the field for so long, that's one of the first things that I kind of help clients recognize is, what are you feeling?
Yeah.
We have a lack of understanding of what our emotions represent. We're used to extreme emotions, happy, sad, angry, and those look different to everybody. But what about, just being kind of envious or being, it doesn't have to be an extreme emotion, just being content, just being okay. We're always looking for these extremes. Like when people use the word depression, or one of the big examples I give is, people who clean their house excessively. They're like, oh, I'm so OCD. It's no,
I love that.
no, ma'am. Antisocial. Everybody thinks antisocial means I'm not social. Antisocial is not that whatsoever. So I do think it's more about, yes, getting children as well as their parents in tune with what emotions people actually feel. When you're getting into adolescence, this is where we're dealing with complex emotions. We go from just being happy and sad to something more complex, like jealous, and your self-esteem goes low, and you're struggling with these barriers, but they don't know how to tap into that. And what we've seen in the school systems with the unfortunate shootings and the unfortunate lack of services, and we're being very reactive to what we have to right now. But where's the prevention? What are we doing to get involved and get ahead of it? Because back in the day, we didn't have two working parents, right?
Yeah. We had somebody stayed home, took care of the family.
Mhm.
And
But nowadays, with the economy the way that it is, I'm in a family where me and my partner, we work. So we're relying on the system a lot to raise our children because we both have to work. So we're getting a little more disconnected with our children because of the way the world is now. And because of that, and now the schools are over inundated and they're getting funding cut. So we have to cut things that are more supplemental outside of the black and white, what we have to teach them. But we're missing a basic foundation of how do we stay in tune with what we're feeling, because everything that happens to us later in life, mental illnesses, inabilities to cope, picking up addiction, having maladaptive other behaviors, a lot of it has to do with our inability to attach ourselves to what we're actually feeling, and recognizing that just because I feel this way doesn't mean I need to act negatively with it. I can feel and be okay.
absolutely. And if we could shift the focus a little bit more off of IQ and into EQ
Mm-hmm.
and emotional quotient and emotional intelligence, if you will, where you can recognize emotions in others and in yourself, and you can discern what's good and bad and what's healthy and unhealthy. That's really, really important. I think that's where the success is going to come in. Listen, these days we've got all of this technology here,
Mm-hmm.
people. You want me to say something in Russian? Give me 3 seconds and I'll have my phone translate to Russian.
Mm-hmm.
If I need to solve a critical math problem, I've got this. We've gone into technology that does a lot of the thinking for us. And I still think we need to understand basics, yes. But what we don't have is any kind of barometer or gauge or understanding of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many people walking around with negative self-talk and I'll say haunted by demons within themselves. And there's no explanation. Nobody's talking about it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, I mean, I'd love to see that become more part of the mainstream.
I absolutely agree. And I think that, with technology coupled in with the families having to work so much and not being able to engage with their families the way they want to, because, their parents are stressed out too. They need some time to be able to kind of cope with that. The other piece is, one, there's no frustration tolerance anymore. And I give this example where I remember being in, middle school, and I lived in a small town in upstate New York, and I lived 5 miles out of town. And I asked my dad on a weekend, like, hey, do you mind dropping me off into town so I can hang out with my friends? And if my dad didn't feel like it, he'd say no. And all I could do, mind you, this was pre-cell phones and things like that. All I could do was sit there and be frustrated. I had to be pissed off. And you know what? Nothing happened. It didn't kill me. It sucked, but it didn't kill me. The other piece is the need for instant gratification, right? If I was told no and I had to sit there with it, or I was told because I said so, granted, we're stepping away from why we shouldn't be doing that. But the point remains the same is, if you don't like my answer, you're going to find it yourself right now. You don't know how to wait for that. You don't know how to learn that on your own. And with technology too, a lot of these children, they're not learning how to communicate effectively with one another in person. This is why they could text everything. It's taken out of context. It could be shared and manipulated. And we're not able to kind of know how to socially interact with one another anymore outside of partying events, right? Outside of that, we don't know just how to be with one another. That also leads into a sexuality piece too, where kids these days, it used to be first base, second base, third base, and there's a progression because you get to know somebody. There's emotional attachment. We're so disconnected to our emotional states most times that we just do the things and we don't think about what we're feeling.
Right, exactly. It's being in touch with that stuff that's so important. And we carry so much stuff. You may think, oh, no, I'm really fine. But, have you always been fine? Because all the stuff that you've never dealt with still kind of drags along with you. And in one way, shape, or form, like you might not realize some of the traumas you had as a child until you actually have your own kids. Or you might not realize the trauma you had in school until you go into a certain work environment. And so all these things come up, but without a working basic knowledge of mental health. Most people can't even describe what mental health is. Or mental illness or mental issues. What is the appropriate term now? Do we know?
It's mental health.
Mental health.
And I prefer that term anyway, because it takes away the stigma, right? When you say mental illness, again, we're already looking at a label. And this is a big barrier, for people. But
if I catch a cold, that's an illness.
You're right.
Why am I afraid of, I don't tell anybody, I don't say, oh no, I don't have a cold. No, not me. I'm perfect. No, if I have a cold, I'm like, yeah, I got a cold. Back up. I'm going to sneeze on your ass. All right. That's what we do. But with you got a broken bone. It's sticking out of your arm. It's not like you're ashamed that you got a broken bone.
Right.
But when something doesn't work up here, or emotionally or mentally, all of a sudden we're ashamed.
But I think it starts with being accepting of the fact that we have to have mental health. We have to have mental awareness, right? Emotional awareness in order for us to be able to work through something to see if we have a diagnosis that we need to treat and make that a more regular conversation. Because whether or not it's a diagnosable illness or it's just symptoms of, either way, they could both be treated into some capacity, as long as we're open to do so. Just because, for example, I'm sad because I'm going through something, that doesn't mean I'm depressed, but that doesn't mean I can't benefit from talking about it or processing it or working it through. I may not have like a diagnosable depression diagnosis, but I could be working through an emotional state that maybe if I work through this now, maybe it would defer the fact that we later on may deal with a serious mental health issue.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's also the way where it goes too far the other direction, where every time I sneeze, I think I'm going to die. And the same thing can happen with mental health. And we've seen ADD overprescribed. You got people coming into treatment for addiction and doctors are saying, oh, they need to be on Ritalin. They need to be on this. It's like, don't you understand the withdrawal, the pause will mimic ADD? Wait until they're sober before you make that. Or the thing where in the 80s and the early 90s, everybody was diagnosed as manic depressive. Manic depressive was the candy that they handed out at every doctor's office. After that, it became bipolar. Bipolar became the thing. And it's like everybody's bipolar. And then everybody's this and everybody's that. So we got to be careful not to go too far the other way, to understand what is a healthy, I want to say this right. What is a healthy amount of discomfort? What is a healthy amount of sadness? What is a healthy amount of grief and things like that? Without conversations, we don't know.
Right. And I think that's the biggest component, is just being able to have a space to be able to just express those feelings. And it's still not normal enough. It makes people uncomfortable, right? If for example, I'm a woman, clearly, and I'm very upset and I start crying and I'm emotional about something. Well, what you may not know about me is that I don't cry out of sadness. I cry out of frustration, but you may not know that. But you also may be uncomfortable with a female crying because you're like, I don't know what to do with that. I don't want to say the wrong thing. And then I get invalidated. So I'm going to stop doing that and expressing myself over time because I'm not getting a response that I need in the moment. But again, that takes a conversation.
Right.
And I do feel that, back in the day, everybody wanted to use certain labels, and that, based on what we knew at the time and based on what was being reported. This all has to start with, outside of just obviously the advocacy, the education, and keeping these conversations open. A lot of the other barriers that we run into with the current treatments we have right now is based on diagnosing. And diagnosing is an art form. And I'm very, very particular about my diagnostic abilities, Because first and foremost, I can't treat you appropriately as a therapist until I really understand what your diagnosis is. Now, for those who have a mental illness and substance abuse, in order for me to give you a mental health diagnosis, I have to see you without substances in your system because, like you said, there's a lot of substances that mirror different things. I can be high on cocaine and be seeing squirrels in the sky, and it looks like I'm hallucinating, but in reality, that's substance induced. So if I go to an appropriate place to get treatment, and they don't rule that out or take that into consideration, I'm walking into my next level of care with a schizophrenic diagnosis, with a cocaine diagnosis. And this is the other reason why people struggle to go get help, is because there's so many diagnoses. I can't tell you how many clients come in and they're like, oh, I've been diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, anxiety, PTSD, personality disorders. And it's like, I'm overwhelmed. And diagnosing also is stipulated right now by the insurance companies on the level of care you're going to and what they'll pay for. So there's a lot of barriers to this as well if we don't appropriately assess and diagnose to begin with to get people the right help that they need.
I want to connect addiction and mental health and trauma and all these things together in a minute, but I want to stay on mental health for 1 second. You're talking about diagnosis. With many medical conditions, physical medical conditions, there's a very clear path to a diagnosis. You know, if they're exhibiting this, this, and this, and you see a bone sticking out of the skin, he's probably broke his leg. And, you know, but there's more. I mean, I'm making it very simple, but with most medical conditions, it's not a lot of interpretation as much as these are the facts. With mental health, there's still too much room for interpretation, is what I'm understanding. That if you go to 4 different doctors, you could give 4 different diagnoses. Is there a problem with trying to like consolidate this and having a standard, or are we getting there, or where are we at?
It's like I mentioned before, it's first and foremost, one, this is based on client report. So anything that I do to assess you, I have to base it on what you're willing to tell me.
Self-reporting is a big problem.
It's a huge problem.
Yes.
And what they're going to admit. Two, if people who study the DSM as I did when I was in school, one of the things we have to rule out with any mental illness is this substance induced and is this medically induced? In order for me to even get to a mental health diagnosis, I have to know for a fact you are not under the influence and that's what's causing your symptoms, or you don't have an underlying medical condition that is contributing to this behavior or these issues. So when you're going to certain levels of care, again, I used to work in hospitals and we would have somebody come in, cops would bring them in under a bake rack. They were floridly psychotic, dancing naked in the streets on Broward Boulevard. That happens. And they go in and
only on Saturday nights. It's a lot of fun.
It is. So they come in, and until we get a UA on them, they have to be given a diagnosis in order for the hospital to admit them and bill their insurance. So they're going to get psychosis not otherwise specified, right? Then they get the UA, they clear it out. They're medicating them based on what they can. And by the time they leave, the diagnosis changed to maybe, you know, they found out they were on Molly, which is another lovely thing that's going on right now, but they also have an underlying bipolar disorder. But they were able to take away the substance to really see the baseline. Now you're going to get stepped down to another level of care. That's how you presented there, right?
All right.
So you presented there and they're saying that you're bipolar. Well, now that you come to sit with me and I'm on an outpatient level of care, I see you for an extended period of time. I get to see you in your natural element. I may see something different over time. It's not necessarily interpretation. It's when, and this is the insurance game and the whole thing too, is in order to bill to get a certain level of care for these clients, in order to get them the help that they need, I have to have a diagnosis. But good practice in mental health is I'm not supposed to diagnose at least for a couple of weeks because I want to see your true baseline.
That's the problem. That's the problem. I mean, the observation cannot be done in an afternoon or in an hour or even in 1 week. You need to have the baseline and see how things go. And then if you're now combining that with addiction, now it's an almost impossible task. If somebody comes in and they're, I mean, if I'm watching somebody running through the streets trying to tear their own skin out, yelling at trees and bending over backwards and contorting their bodies to a point of breaking themselves, I'm thinking like that's got to be a serious disorder, but it could also be flakka.
Yep.
I mean, so how do we deal with this? Because there's some insurance companies that want to pay for the mental health and not the addiction, but you got to clear up the addiction before you can deal with the mental health. So, I mean, it's like a mess, right?
It is. And that's the whole thing about it is that, you know, based on Oh, of course it is.
Of course.
Of course it is. I'm being watched right now.
No, that was for me. That was for me.
So one, it's making sure we're teaching, and I'm also, just a caveat the many things I've done in my life, I'm also a qualified supervisor for a licensed clinicians, and I'm also a student intern supervisor. So what I've also taken the time to really teach my students as they come in with me is how to appropriately assess and diagnose off the beginning, because I don't think that skill is being taught efficiently enough on in work experience. So I can now it's me. I can regurgitate any information I study and I memorize, right? Like that's totally fine. I can memorize information. I could do that on an exam and be okay. But learning how to apply it in a human being. So when I read my textbook and it says, okay, John Doe has all these symptoms, well, you're going to make it easy for me. I'm going to be able to do that. But now you're a real person in my face. How do I really learn how to apply these diagnostic skills and really know how to assess and rule things out and consider alternatives? That takes experience over time. And that's the difficult part with the education system for our field anyway, is that application piece when you're at a standard level of care. It has to be, you have to take your time, knowing what to rule out, having good assessments set up in your systems. So your electronic record systems, making sure you're not using blanket statements and really doing the work. The other part of it is, treatment centers are, it's difficult. It's difficult. They are understaffed sometimes. They have, financial limitations because insurance companies aren't paying out. And all of these factor into the quality of the trainings that you could provide for your staff and the support to be ordered to make good decisions and be held accountable. Because at the end of the day, treatment, whether it's mental health, addiction, hospitalization or not, it's a business.
Right.
So we're balancing the line between what the business wants and what, I have outcomes to do versus what is in the best interest of the client. Insurance be damned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've changed a lot. Now the link we see between mental health and addiction and trauma, it's like the trifecta right there. Mm-hmm. Trauma, mental health, addiction, or it could be addiction, then trauma, then mental health. It could be mental health. One could feed the other, one could start the other, but in a lot of cases, more often than people would think, people end up with all three problems. Mm-hmm. Okay. This is new information. We weren't talking about this in the 90s or in the 2000s or even in the 2010s. We were just starting to figure out the real connection between mental health and addiction. Mm-hmm. So what do we have to do to start to really address, if we've identified the problem, and I know you're talking about all the issues you have with trying to diagnose and stuff, but what is it we need to do so that we can realize this is all these parts? How are we going to work on all these things?
My belief, the way that I look at addiction is it's a maladaptive coping skill. At the end of the day, people use drugs because they want to control how they feel about something, whether it's they want to avoid feeling it in completion, they want to amplify an emotion. But, I think I read somewhere like 70% of the US population at any given time can have a diagnosable mental illness, right? What they do with
I know all 70%. I think I know them all. They're all my neighbors.
Probably. Oh yeah. They're all Broward County. So we have this big problem, and people use substances to deal with emotional dysregulation at the end of the day. You have an emotion that you can't handle. You don't know what to do with. And again, this goes back to the prevention we talked about in the schools, getting you in tune with those feelings and learning how to use them and work with them and work them out so that you don't lead down the road to using maladaptive coping. And I do feel that we are in the right direction, because at least now the one benefit of having, a lot more treatment centers be private and things like that, and expanding those services to be included under insurances, which despite my complaining, there's definitely a benefit. Being able to access care is always going to be a benefit.
Yes.
But I think that highlighting that, behind it all, we need to have process-based therapy. Therapy is the basics. Back in the 90s, the reason why a lot of the times they're like, hey, you have this diagnosis is because we're going to flick a pill in your mouth and call it a day, and you just take your pills and you're good. But that in and of itself is conditioning people to think they need something outside of themselves to control how they feel, and they never amplify just talking about it. And the same thing happened like with Adderall when ADHD was the big diagnosis, right? So they would flick all this Adderall on kids, but they found out a lot of those behaviors would go down naturally with placebos based on just kind of not for nothing getting bullied in school. If you're that kid that's going to be bouncing around like this all the time, at some point, you're going to realize that there's places you could do that and not as much. Now, granted, I'm not saying I'm not a believer in ADHD medications for certain children, absolutely. But it's also in which we're conditioning our children, giving them meds. If I'm like, oh my God, is it your medication time yet? They're going to get conditioned to think they need something outside of themselves to be normalized.
But we're a pill nation.
Mm-hmm.
We grew up in this. Fentanyl's killing us.
Oh, yeah.
There's not another country in the world that treats fentanyl the way we do.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because we're a pill nation. From the moment you're born,
mm-hmm.
you're watching commercials and advertisements and people, you have a headache, take a pill.
Mm-hmm.
Can't sleep, take a pill. Can't wake up, take a pill.
Mm-hmm.
You're nervous, take a pill. You want to relax, take a pill. Everything's about taking a pill.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as our nose starts running and our body is trying to expel, I don't want to be gross. I hope you're not eating while you're watching this. All that snot that comes out, that's all mucus and germs and garbage that your body's trying to expel. And we as Americans, first thing we do is let me take a pill, dry that up, and keep all the illness inside me.
Mm-hmm.
We're a pill nation. So now you bring over pills that kill us, and we're going to take them willingly.
Yep. And they make us feel real big.
But I wanted to take that to what you were saying about the ADHD and the over prescribing of Adderall and Ritalin and all of those.
Mm-hmm.
With mental health, there's also an over prescription thing going on, where the minute somebody starts feeling something, we're not looking at alternative medicines at all.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a little bit, but when you look at the grand scheme of things, we're not doing enough of that. We need to be doing more of that.
I agree. And that's kind of why I brought up that whole like generational thing of having like two parents that have to work and all this stuff, right? It's not for nothing. Right now in life, it's easier for me to go to a psychiatrist, get a prescription, pop pills, because I have so much going on. Doing therapy means I have to take time every week to sit down to talk to somebody. I have to make myself very uncomfortable on a regular basis. I have to talk about the stuff that basically has been like, please don't talk about that. It's been such pushed against for us to be open about it, that why would I make myself uncomfortable to heal, right? When I can just have an Instafix and I still have life to do. There's so much I have to take care of all the time. And that's the other pressure of the generation that we're in right now, is looking good on the outside, right? As long as the Instagram famous people, it looks good on the outside, but meanwhile, everybody's internally struggling, but we don't want to talk about that. I mean, look at how many musicians, artists, and I'm sure you've talked about this before, that they have it all. They have all the money in the world. They have all the things in the world, yet they're miserable.
Yes.
And what we're doing is, but give them a pill and they're going to be fine because they don't have time to work through things. At the end of the day, psychiatry is supposed to be correlated with therapy, because the point of medications is to level off your brain chemistry, right? To kind of get you to a point so you're in a space to be able to process safely and learn coping skills. I mean, in theory, again, another study I read at one point, when people reach out for therapy, they're usually in a crisis for anxiety or depression.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't reach out within 3 weeks, or you have a session within 3 weeks, I'm going to lose that client, because by then they've coped with that issue and they're like, nope, see, it really wasn't that big of a deal. And they go right back. And then a few months later, it's going to happen again, because again, we only look for help in crisis. We're not preventing, we're reactive.
That's why with One Brother, One Sister in our trainings, if you're going to do an intervention on somebody, you don't have 8 weeks to put together a plan and train a team. You have to go when they're in a moment of crisis. I call it the tattoo problem. While you're sitting in the chair and they're giving you a tattoo and they're doing you're sitting there and you're like, oh man, it hurts. I'm never doing this again. This is stupid. This is awful. As soon as they're done, they put a little Tiger Balm on it, wrap it in cellophane. You walk out the door, you look up, you say, oh, I like that. I don't think I'll get that.
It's like having a
baby.
What
happened?
It's like having a baby.
Like having a baby. Any woman who truly remembers the pain that you went through, this whole nation would be one child and done. And done.
If even that.
If what?
If even that.
If even that.
Like watching somebody else having a baby, watching their pain, you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. But we go back to do it again. And I love that point, because it's going to highlight like something that I kind of bring up with my clients when they're kind of struggling is, think about something you're most proud of in your life.
All right.
For me, it's being a mom, or my education, my career. Was that something that was handed to me overnight?
Right.
Did I have to? I worked for it.
Yeah.
Right? That's why I'm proud of it. I worked my ass off to get it. That's why I'm proud of it. That's what gives me strength and drive. So you're taking care of yourself, treating yourself. This process isn't going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it at the end, because it's something you're going to be proud of, because it took hard work. We don't take pride in things that were handed to us. We don't. And I think that's a big barrier that people don't consider as well, is And that's how I get my people to understand in treatment. Like, yes, you've built these patterns over a course of 20 years, 10 years, 30 years, whatever the case may be. 30 days in treatment is not going to uncondition and recondition you in any other way, but it could start planting the seed for you to start keep this process open and being aware and having that emotional awareness and being in tune with yourself and being proud of the fact that, yes, not every day is easy, but every day is getting easier.
Right. That's it. But you can't do that by, and here's again, old school thinking that we need to kind of rethink, by always being the victim.
Oh, yes.
Okay. We cannot be the victim of the traumas that we suffer anymore. We must change the thinking on that. Certainly, we can't be the victim of mental health, and definitely not the victim of addiction. We've got to decide that, listen, I was a participant within this, because then I could change it.
Right.
Then I could work towards something. If I'm always a victim and it's like, oh, I had no control in it, you can't change it. How are you going to change something that you don't have control over? So understanding but that part of that is the stigma too. If I could say very openly, I have a problem with drugs, I have a problem with alcohol, I have a depression issue, I have this or that. If I could say that stuff openly, that gives me power.
Right.
But the fact that people are afraid to say that and they become ashamed, it drives it deeper in. We remain the victim and we just keep like piling stuff on top.
Yes,
and
it
nothing,
recycles.
So you don't have the possibility of working through things unless you find a way to reconcile that. Now, is that something that should be reconciled? Like, where should that be reconciled? I mean, is that like everywhere?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we don't even recognize what is traumatic for us. Now, this is the thing with trauma, is obviously we all can identify, and I think across the nation, if, childhood sexual abuse, obviously extremely traumatic, like those are the extremes. But trauma is also, it's based on your perspective. I have this wonderful individual client that I see pro bono that I've worked with for the past year and a half. This kid, he had everything for his childhood. He was given everything that he needed, but he was emotionally neglected. And it's not that he didn't have all the things. He had food, he was taken care of very well. It's just emotionally he was neglected, not abused, just neglected. This kid ended up with OCD tendencies due to the fact that he perceived that emotionally as a child as a neglect and never reconciled that until later in life. And once he did, he was able to take his power back and kind of process through that. What is traumatic for me may not be traumatic for somebody else.
That's right.
And I think that's something to consider too. And that's why keeping the stigma away and having these open conversations to be able to be in tune to say, hey, I don't feel well with this. I don't like this, because otherwise we internalize it over time, because children are going to make sense with the world the best way they can.
Right.
That's what we do. We're going to make it make sense the best way we can. We're going to cope with it the best way we can, but we're children and that's how life works. And then we get older and we're starting, if we're fortunate enough, because like I said, access to care is good, but people need to be open to want to do it, because we've also looked at the studies of court ordered treatment and how terrible that is. We love that. To be able to reflect back and say, hey, listen, like I've noticed that my relationships since childhood, I have these patterns of behaviors with my relationships. Yeah. And maybe that is because I felt that way about my parents growing up. Does that mean your parents were bad? No, we're all doing the best we can. If there was a freaking manual on how to be a parent, all us parents wouldn't feel like a piece of shit sometimes. There is no perfect manual to be a parent. We're all going to fuck up. And having that openness and saying that too, when's the last time you knew a parent to have that humility to even express their own crap to their kid?
Absolutely. And it's funny because I grew up in a situation where I was under physical abuse by the stepfathers and different things like that. And I would curse and I would hate it. And I would be like, I'm never going to be like that. And I always carried that with me. I'm going to be a good dad. I'm going to take care of, but I never dealt with it. I never talked about it with anybody. It was just an inner dialogue I had, but I never said to anybody, I want to cry. I want to die. I'm hurting. I'm scared all the time. And I never told anybody that. So what happened was I became an abusive parent. And I could not believe, how did I come to this place? I came to that place because at no point, now, when you're a child and you're being abused, it's not the child's fault. There's no participation by the child at all.
Of course.
But as you become an adult, it's your job to transcend that in some way. It's like, listen, I no longer ride a tricycle. I no longer, chase the ice cream truck down the road. It's just not what I do. I no longer carry this either. We got to kind of transition.
Mhm.
but you got to talk about it. You got to be able to talk about it. Everybody's got something. I think the big thing is that everybody thinks their trauma doesn't quite matter as much.
Right.
You know, it's like,
Because we have that mentality from childhood too, like somebody's got it worse than me.
yeah,
I hate that phrase. I hate that phrase so much. Like in a moment of like coping, if you need to say that to yourself to kind of work through it. But if we lived our lives thinking, well, somebody's got it worse than me, what we tend to do is dismiss or minimize the effect this is having on us, right? Like, who am I to complain about how miserable I am when I have all these nice things? And then it stops us from admitting that. I mean, again, I go back to the rock stars. They have everything. They have millions of dollars and all these things, but they get miserable too.
my favorite was Philip Seymour Hoffman. He had a problem with mental health and he had a problem with addiction. And he cleaned himself up because he really wanted to try to make it in Hollywood, and he did it. He made it, and at the point before he died, he was the highest paid actor in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, little fat guy, talked weird. I mean, anybody that can pull off Capote that well is an oddball. He had everything. Everything he ever wanted was right there. And then he went back to the drugs and died.
Mm-hmm.
What happened?
Mm-hmm.
Why does this happen? Is it because they assume that the things are going to make the other things better? What is it?
Well, I think that's part of the process that people don't understand in therapy too. Like, therapy isn't just about like, I'm going into therapy and you're going to give me all my answers and you're going to just give me a magical phrase and everything's going to make me feel better, because again,
There
we're
we go.
insta fixing.
Yes.
Because we don't have time for that. Life is stressful. So we don't give advice. And when you come in and you admit to these things to yourself, you know, we kind of sit with you to realize that part of why you're perceiving the things the way they are is because of the way you think. So and we're not even in tune because they're automatic thoughts, right? So for example, if you wake up in the morning and you ever like even been on vacation, you woke up and you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Why? Like, we can't always. So I went through this training the other day and this professor said, you know, you can't always control how you feel. And I'm a therapist. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? But it makes so much sense. We don't. We have to recognize what we feel and deal with that. So
right.
When we wake up and we feel kind of blah, we put on what I call my shit glasses, and I'm filtering in everything that's going to co-sign that negativity, right? And let me ask you, how many red cars did you see on your way here today?
I can't tell you.
No clue, right? But I bet you'll count them on your way home. Why? Because now I brought it up into your awareness. Now you're going to filter that out.
That's right.
Once I'm in recognition that, oh my gosh, I'm dismissing the positive because all I'm looking at is this shit in my life, I can change the way I'm thinking to help to filter myself out better. And that's a beautiful natural skill to teach anybody to do, right? Is when I'm recognizing that all I see is one extreme. That's not normal. We need balance in life.
Yeah,
right? But once we're aware of it, we challenge it and we can work on that and move forward. So we can avoid that being a consistent thing. Is it going to stop it forever? No, that's the other thing with mental health. If you go in for depression, your expectation is I will never be depressed again. You go to a doctor, you have a cold. They're going to treat your cold.
Right.
It goes away. It's not like that in mental health. It's not. I can't guarantee you're never going to be depressed again. That's unnatural. Like you may get sad again. You very well may. Is your expectation to always be happy? What is your expectation to get out of therapy? I want to be happy all the time. I don't ever want to think about this stuff again. That's a lot of the stuff that I get in therapy too. Again, that insta fix. I don't want to go through it.
That kind of grandiosity is almost its own mental illness in
know.
itself, right? Where everything's going to be perfect and
let's be Pollyannish all the time.
Puppy dogs and sunshine is going to shoot out of my butt every day, and that's what I got. I want to get into what you're doing now because you're on the front line now. You're battling this thing front line. And again, I thank you for everything that you do because I watch you work, and we've worked together on some things, which is cool. And I see the chaos that sometimes you got to handle, and everything. But you're really kind of knee deep in this stuff. Mm-hmm. So before we talk about JC Recovery Center, I just got to ask: every day that there's not every day, often we get that tragic news that somebody we were trying to help didn't make it. Mm-hmm. And, if you're anything like me, I don't sleep well when that stuff happens. I don't say that it's, hey, that's what happens. They're an addict. They die. No, it's not acceptable. And I lose sleep. When your head hits a pillow, you're like, shit, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm done. Mm-hmm. And you wake up the next morning. What gets you moving again?
This is a war. We're at war trying to get this done.
Yeah.
And, like I mentioned earlier, there's nothing in your life that you're proud of unless you've worked really hard for it. And if I stop fighting, I kind of look at who else loses motivation. This isn't easy. This is not an easy fight. This is why it needs to be fought for so much. It's not easy. And the statistics are against us with relapse and with overdosing. But, we're still reacting to things and not being responsive. We're not being preventative, and we still haven't implemented that. And that's a big piece that what keeps me going is I'm never going to let anybody pass in vain, because I'm going to learn from every passing that happens, and I'm going to elevate it from there. I'm going to honor them, and rather than quit on it because of them. Who am I to throw out the baby with bathwater, so to speak, because statistics are against us? That's why I'm fighting this fight. It's frustrating. It gets overwhelming sometimes. I do question my ability as a therapist. I've questioned my ability as a director, as a boss, as a supervisor.
But we should question those things.
Of
we
course.
should. And as professionals in mental health and addiction, when we lose somebody, we should say to ourselves, what did I miss?
Mm-hmm.
What could I have done more? Because that's how we grow.
Mm-hmm.
When we say, well, I did everything I can and they just weren't ready. That's a bullshit statement
Mm-hmm.
that I hate. I hope we can get rid of it. They just weren't ready. No, we just didn't figure out how to reach them.
Well, just like
and
we
the
teach
more
clients.
we learn, the more we're going to teach. So when we do lose somebody, if you're a professional out there, don't accept it as this is
Mm-hmm.
part of what happens. This is our failing, and we got to figure out where we can because we learn from that stuff. And maybe next time the same person who walks up to us will be able to help. And it's so important, right?
And isn't that what we try to teach our clients every day?
That's what exactly.
We teach everybody in the world that way, that a mistake happened. What can I control? It's not about being a victim, like you mentioned earlier. What that does is project you blame other people, which it very well could be somebody else's fault, but we are responsible for us. How do we take that power back to do something productive?
Yes.
And I think that's kind of like why I want this to be an overall mentality of humans at this point, of just, what can I do about me? How can I take care of me? Not just in a selfish way too, because if I'm well with myself and I'm aware and I process through things, I do have better connections. I do have better attachment to people. I can have appropriate boundaries where I'm not carrying resentments and I can let things go. I can't control it every day, but I could be better at it every day to where I can feel empowered and, learn how to enjoy my life and embrace it and do the fun things and engage in things in a truly happy way. So yeah, I do feel it's, at the end of the day, if somebody messes up or whatever, what accountability do we have? How do we get better? How do I learn from this so I could fix a system? Maybe it's a system failure. Maybe it's a training issue. Maybe it's I have to make sure that we assess for something certain. Do I need to add a trauma track? Do I need to do something in particular to target something to make it better? Because statistics are against us anyway, whether it was you or somebody else.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we can't keep moving forward.
And you mentioned something about taking care of yourself, but not being selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, self-aggrandizing and doing things like that's selfish. And then when it's all about me,
Mm-hmm.
but taking care of yourself is the best thing you could do for the people who count on you and love you and support you. I think a lot of people are like, well, I can't take care of myself. I got to work and I got to take care of the kids and I got to do this. I have responsibilities.
That busy life.
But the first responsibility you have is to be a better you every day. To make sure that you're healthy, so that the parts that you can do, and you're never going to be able to do everything. I tried it. It sucks. Don't do it.
It does suck.
It sucks trying to do everything. Sometimes you just, fuck it. It's not my job. But taking care of yourself is not selfish in itself.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually the most selfless thing you could do
Mm-hmm.
by creating a person who could be a better service to others, right?
Mm-hmm. But and then, people take that to extremes too. Is, oh, you need to, I'm hearing this a lot, like, oh, you need a safe place to be able to feel good about yourself. Because again, we're taking things to an extreme, but you're absolutely right. And that's again about just being emotionally aware and having emotional intelligence. I am taking care of myself emotionally and mentally and physically. And that's okay. And I have to have balance with that in life. Anything to an extreme is no good. But we need to make it to be okay that I'm not okay. It's okay to not be okay.
But that safe place that you tell, everybody thinks, I need a freaking island where I can be and have my safe place. I need everybody out of my house. The safe place exists in here.
Mm-hmm.
When you become comfortable enough with yourself that you can walk into chaos
Mm-hmm.
and still be okay, that you can walk through fire and not get burned, and you can do all of those things. That's the safe place. Stop looking at anything I search for out beyond this peripheral right here
Yep.
of me is a failed attempt,
Mm-hmm.
is what it is. It might work for a few minutes or a few hours or a few days, but it's a failed attempt at change. Change happens in here. And if you want that safe place and if you want that stability, you fix it in here. You want to be a better dad? I wanted to be a better dad.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I put the alcohol down.
Right.
My kids deserved a better dad. And immediately I figured out the way I could become a better dad is being a better Scott.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to work on me, not work on my dad's skills, work on me.
Right.
Because the only way to be a good dad, and I'm sure moms are the same, show up.
Mm-hmm.
Show up and be present when your children are in front of you. Don't be dismissive. Don't do that.
But I do.
But I can't do that unless I'm okay in here.
But see, being present, and again, I think like because you and I are in the game, the way we understand that language,
Yeah.
the way we understand that language is different, right? For me, being present is I can't be emotionally present with my children until I could slow this down. So because I carry the weight of, I am a clinical director of a facility of upwards of 60 clients at any given time. I have a bunch of staff who, they need support, they need guidance. That's what I'm there for. And then I go home and I need to be present for my children. But I'm still processing through all the things that happen at work today because, again, that's my responsibility. It's my career. It's how I bring money into my family. It's what supports us. And in order for me to be present with my kids and not carry that over, I have to be able to work through that and be aware that, okay, mentally, I need a little time out to make myself present so I can just be in the moment. That's what that means.
Exactly right. It's not fixing everything. And once I've got all the shit cleared up, then I'll be able to focus. Is to be able to say, let me take a little break now to focus here.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing I still got all this stuff going on,
Mm-hmm.
but you know what? I'm not eating every dish in a restaurant in one sitting. I'm
Right.
going to take my time. I'm going to do it. So it's important, but that comes from self-knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and everything else. So now you're working over at JC Recovery. I want to get this in. This is in Hollywood, Florida.
Yes.
And, you're working with people like John Carrollson, Stevie B, and John Giordano, and Brandon, and,
Mm-hmm.
and then just really a pretty cool staff, I got to say.
Oh, yeah.
I really enjoy the staff. I go in there and I have a lot of fun with them, and I enjoy being there. I go teach there on Fridays, which is my joy, and I get to see you, which you're one of my favorite people, so that's cool. But, what is the goal, knowing all of this stuff that you've gathered? I mean, you've been doing research from the time you were 4 years old till now.
Mm-hmm.
What are you trying to achieve at JC right now?
What drew me to come into JC's, to be honest with you, is like, they're holistic. It's the bigger picture. So they're small enough to where they stay really intimate. When I tell you the community that they create there, this isn't a community that's just while you're in treatment. Stevie B has a huge following. He's very well respected. He does amazing work in the recovery community, in his faith-based community. And he does amazing, amazing work. Like, we had a famous actor kind of come in and volunteer his time a couple weeks ago to do a cold plunge.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can say his name or not. That's why I'm like, okay,
No,
just
we're
a
not gonna do
famous
that.
guy, which I thought was really cool, but it's all based on the following. So what I like about JC's is that at the clinic, what I run is the clinical piece. So making sure the groups are therapeutic and we have good clinical process groups for the clients to go to in their PHP and IOP experience. Matching them up with the appropriate individual therapist. I have amazing therapists. Everybody's got their own little niche and specialty, and they're all so willing to learn even more, which I truly appreciate. They're all in it for the right reasons. They're all very tight in and tuned in. A lot of our staff are in recovery themselves or are graduates of our program, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And the nice part is when they leave the clinic itself, then they're surrounded by a whole nother layer of a community, right? There's the JC's community, which is our little bubble. And we connect them to the bigger picture outside. So they're going to outside meetings and getting exposure to faith-based things. And it's within any faith. I just want to clarify that it's any faith imaginable. But the power behind having access to a community on top of therapeutic skills to balance you while you're in this level of care. You only get 30 days to kind of get to where you need to be. But being wrapped up like that and having a bunch of different ways to kind of have support in your recovery and different things to connect to, you may not like this piece of it, but boy, I really like this. And you can figure out what your recovery looks like in the most supportive way. So it's small enough to where it's very intimate. They've been in business for 11 years. They've done incredible things. I love the fact of how connected everybody is and how everybody believes in what we do that works there and that our clients there.
They have a lot of great things. They're not going out there trying to be the shiniest or with all the bells and whistles and the masseuse, the people who rub your body, the masseuses, massage
therapist. We'll just be really nice.
But although if you need something, then they can get you the service if you need it. But they're not there to do that. They're there to really develop what you were just talking about, is to reach every individual. And you can't do that when you got 1,000 clients and 500 clients, and you guys do that very well. And I watch the way, and even when a client's mad at somebody, I've seen them walk through the courtyard being, "Oh man, that shit pissed me off," and then people come over and say, "Well, yeah." They talk about it. They work it out themselves, and it's really neat. It's a real community feeling, and it makes people feel safe to explore what's going on. And with this much mental health involved in the addictions, having that safe community is so important.
Oh yeah. And I love the fact that we're also holistic and we incorporate a lot of cool like breath work and meditation. But the nice part is that we practice what we preach. So for example, Stevie B practices what he preaches with the clients. He practices what he does. He does his own breath work. He does his own cold plunges. We live it. I'm one of those bosses. And I'm also one of those supervisors where, if I'm having a bad day, I let my staff aware. I model that. It's okay to not have a good day. Listen, guys, I'm having a bad day. I just need a little space right now. I got to handle a couple of things. I'll be out in a minute. Let me know if it's a crisis. I do that in front of clients. We make it normalized to kind of normalize what you and I have been talking about this whole time is whether it's me, who is, I guess, a welly for lack of a better term. I also have my own struggles, but I'm not an addict. I'm not in recovery. I'm a child of an addict. I can still show you that I have vulnerabilities as a boss who has a license and who has all these certifications and who's lives in a nice house, 3 kids. And I look like I'm the pillar of health when I'm not, nobody is. And I want to normalize that. So I show my staff that. I model it to them. My staff model it to the clients. The owners model it to everybody there. And I think that's what makes it work so well is we are what we say we are. And we practice that so consistently that the clients get to see it in real time and see that it's not just me because I'm an addict. It's just me. You have to be an addict to understand me. I once told a client, he's like, "Well, you're not an addict. You don't understand." I'm like, "So if you had cancer, unless I had cancer as a doctor, I couldn't treat you." That's how we're doing this. Same kind of concept. So it's just normalizing the wellness and practicing what we preach. And we do that every day.
And there's a great level of honesty that I see goes on there with the clients too. I mean, nobody's blowing sunshine up people's skirts. They're very straightforward. The clients know 99% of the time they know what's going on and what's, it's not like there's it's not like you got people behind the curtain. Don't look behind the curtain. That's right. The guy pulling. I mean, the owners are out there walking and talking and chatting them up too. And it's a great program. jcrecoverycenter.com. If you want to learn more information, that's jcrecoverycenter.com. Go to the site, check it out, and call and ask questions, right?
Absolutely. We have, staff that pick up the phone 24/7. They're actually graduates of our program. They definitely, will engage with you, whether you just want information, you need help. I mean, even if we can't be the place to help you, that's one thing that I appreciate about our admissions team is that they go out of their way, whether it's us or not. We're in there for the right reasons. We're going to help you regardless if we're the ones or not. We're not in the business to be selfish. We're in the business to help.
Yeah, because I've sat in on your meetings, which I don't even know if I'm supposed to be in there for those meetings. Okay. But I've heard more times than not, you guys bring up somebody's name. Hey, Bobby's gone beyond what we can do. Where can we send him to where he can get more? Or even we don't have what they need. Let's take them somewhere else. And that's a standard for you guys. I mean, it's not just I got a head in a bed and they're going to pay, so I'm going to keep them. If you can't do the job, you find someone else.
But I think that kind of ties in what we talked about earlier about appropriate diagnosing and managing treatment is if it's not me, it will be somebody else and it's in the best interest of the client. And that's who I'm here to help. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because that is your business. If you're not having some success level at all, you're out of business anyway. You don't worry about chasing money. So make sure you do right by the clients. All the other stuff follows. So jcrecoverycenter.com. Check it out. Megan, you do great work over there. I know they love you and I love you and I think you're great, but I don't know a lot about you personally. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do
Oh boy.
we're going to do a little questionnaire.
Okay.
Have you ever seen Inside the Actors Studio? James Lipton used to do this questionnaire with the celebrities. And this came from Bernard Pivot, which was a great interviewer from France who had this 10 questions. So it just gives us a chance to get to know you a little bit.
All right.
Because I got a feeling the wheels are turning in here about doing some sort of really mental health based show on a regular basis. And I'm going to ask you to be a part of it. So you can't say no now because it's out there.
I wouldn't say no anyway.
All right. So first, what's your favorite word? Just a personal thing.
Likely the F word.
The F word is your favorite word. Okay. What's your least favorite word?
Hate.
Okay. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, emotionally? What really gets your juices? What gets you excited?
Intellectual concepts, abstract things, people being able to talk about just their perspectives of different, like I love a good conspiracy theory.
Oh, cool. I got a few of those. Okay. What turns you off totally?
Rudeness.
Yeah. No reason for it, right?
Just absolute rudeness. Yeah. Especially like service workers and stuff.
Yeah.
No.
What is your favorite curse word? I think we already know.
Yeah, it's my favorite word of the world. So yeah, that word.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Okay. What sound or noise do you love to hear?
My kid's laughing.
That's a good one. What sound or noise do you hate?
Like that grinding nails on a chalkboard type thing.
No.
Yeah.
No. Oh, gotcha. Okay. If you could try any profession other than what you do, if you could attempt any profession, what would you like to try?
Do I have to be good at it?
No, just you would love to I wish I could do that. What is your secret fantasy profession?
I mean, in theory, I would like not to work ever again. So there's that.
Laziness is her profession.
I mean, not for nothing. Maybe being like an entrepreneur.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, in some senses, you already are, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
What profession would you never like to try? Never would even want to get near it.
Finances.
I'm with you.
I mean, I'll spend it. I don't care about it.
All right. Last question. If heaven exists, I'm just going to go with the thought that if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say to you when you arrive at the pearly gates?
That I did good.
Oh, I think you did do good. And I think you continue to do good. And we're going to see more of you, I hope.
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right. Fantastic. So, again, we've been talking with Megan Parter, who is the clinical director and many other things. She has other projects she's involved with, too. And we'll talk more about those as we go out there and stuff. We're definitely going to have Megan come back because we really want to do some more deep diving into mental health and what's available, what's not available, what's missing, what we need to do. But all that's going to be right here on our Sober Life podcast channel. So make sure that you like it, subscribe to it. Megan, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you. And I appreciate all of you out there. We'll catch you next time right here on the Sober Life podcast.